Guys, it all made sense now. Penacony is indeed a vacation story. I mean, what can I say? We got a filler patch that brought a banger of an ending to our Trailblaze expedition in the Planet of Festivities. Well, not that kind of banger, but this banger. And this. And this. Well, this one specifically isn't part of the story, but holy Gallagher, June just ended and July just has begun and we are already getting crumbs about an Aeon who doesn't even have visuals yet. And yeah, I know, we gotta talk about the Path of Finality, but you know, if I have to start July with a banger, this has to be it. Besides, I even made notes about this, and I think I got an idea on how Finality works. Wait, let me show you guys this. No, not this. No, I don't have time to bargain. Yo. Welcome to the third episode of Deep Dive, where we dive deep into pondering what life means if it were to end someday. It's been quite the highlight of patch 2.3, and they dropped some intricate leads on what the finality is, how it works, and what it aims to do. And a while ago, Made in Heaven showed up, which, for the video context, fits perfectly with how the Path of Finality can be understood. And if you don't watch JoJo, or if you don't know what the stance ability is, in simpler terms, it has the ability to reset the universe. Now, if you've unlocked Apocalyptic Shadow, you must have met Elegy, who in her yapping seems to imply some sort of universal reset, with finality causing quote-unquote amber to rupture, immortality to wither, music to mute, light arrows to dim, the dark sun to be reduced to ashes, and the tavern to be covered in dust. And even destruction itself cannot be spared from destruction. She also adds that finality isn't the end of everything, and all things will originate from there and move on to the next finality. So there isn't just one instance of finality given the reference to the next finality, but then it also says that all things will originate from there. So this specific event where things end is also responsible for all the things that are coming into being, thus the universal reset. But what kind of reset will it be? Will it be something like a reversion to the point of square one? Or will it be an overhaul of the universe after being wiped out? If you ask me, the answer is somewhere in between. Think of how it would work as something similar to random seed generators in sandbox games, where it gets to retain the same independent properties but it's only rearranged or randomized in various different occurrences. The thing is, it's explicitly said that finality isn't the end of everything, and it only mentioned those other paths that would be subject to ending. Whether more unmentioned paths would also be subject to ending, we only know that there would be certain aspects of the universe that would still remain. Of course, it's gonna be obvious that we'll get a beginning and an end. I mean, it's already a given constant by finality, but if the aforementioned paths were to end, then at some point, they'll begin to exist again. That being said, we could also assume the same thing for those implied aeons where they retain the properties of their paths. And one interesting fact is that the concept of originating from finality is an oxymoron, given that final is the opposite of origin. And I believe that this has been intended because terminus is also titled one against the current, which reverses through time backwards just as everyone else is heading towards the future, towards the inevitable finality. So then why would finality operate this way? And why is it tied to ironic definitions? Imagine this. You scroll through your social media only to see that almost everyone is fear-mongering because of a certain date that marks the end of the world. Quite many people are afraid of death, some even philosophize what lies after death, but the only choice you would have is to accept that everything will eventually end. And if you belong to a certain faith, then you would be likely to cling to the concept of heaven or the afterlife as a way to approach the end with peace. You wouldn't be as perplexed if everything had to come to an end so suddenly. And if there's already a set prophecy that leads us to a certain end, we take our remaining time to live out the last moments without regrets. But what if you're among the ones who have already known about this fateful end since the beginning? This brings us to two notable factions who follow the Path of Finality, being the Creed Exequi and the Stellaron Hunters. We are already familiar with the Stellaron Hunters, and it's thanks to Jade's massive lore drop that we get to know that Elio, the Destiny Slave, follows the Path of Finality. So all the allegories surrounding their script are starting to make sense now. Everyone in the Astral Express, every planet we've visited, every conflict that we have engaged on, and everyone we have met are all part of the same script, and we are merely just another cast in this story. Elio would be the director or the writer with whom the ending has been decided, which leads me to a related theory that Elio could be an emanator of finality. Nevertheless, the Stellaron Hunters do travel backwards in time in careful and in a calculated manner of positioning, such as when Kafka interrupted our journey to Penacony to tell us that we have to take care of an urgent matter in the Lofu. But it's not like we were coerced into that scenario because we still had a choice, and everyone in the Astral Express went over it through a discussion. And this element of choice has been placed great importance ever since we were given an option to just remain in Herda Space Station, where it gives an alternate ending to what could have happened if we didn't join the Astral Express. Interestingly, it even foreshadowed finality as it quotes, "You hear stories about how the final end of the Express and the Stellaron Hunters shakes the universe to its very core. Sometimes you wonder whether their destiny would have changed had you stepped onto that train." So regardless of whether we joined or not, both the Express and the Stellaron Hunters became a key factor in making a difference. But the way they arrived at the final end is unbeknownst to us because those stories were no longer for us. That final end may have been tragic or it may have been anticlimactic. And if the Astral Express didn't visit the Lofu first to resolve the Stellaron crisis, the contamination of the entire ship would have happened instead, as Kafka has foretold. In the same event, we wouldn't know how the Astral Express crew had taken care of the matters in Belobog, considering that the Trailblazer was that unknown variable for Svarog to reconsider their dealing with the Stellaron. How would they stop Cocolia and the Engine of Creation if we weren't there to reawaken the Will of Preservation? Not to mention, the Trailblaze has a significant part in the story of Penacony, and that the Trailblazer was the only one who managed to interact with Glocky and encounter the fatal flaw that is Misha. You won't be wrong if you're gonna conclude that Penacony is peak, because there we also understand the concept of Trailblaze on a much deeper level. Everything that happened in the Planet of Festivities shifted the highlight on how we get to understand the paths more, instead of just the quelling of the Stellaron. And if you realize this and look back on the Lofu arc, the Stellaron Hunters were already steps ahead of us. When Fuxuan interrogated Kafka, it was proven that she was only after bringing the Trailblazer to the Lofu. This is interesting, because Fuxuan performs divination, which is another means of foretelling the future. But the difference it has with the script is that it can only foresee the outcome from a given event, whereas the script already has the history of the future including multiple events and outcomes. So if we factor in the events of Penacony, it could be that our time in the Lofu wasn't mainly on forming connections with the Alliance, but actually a setup from the Stellaron Hunters in our future understanding about the path of the hunt. Everyone, brace yourselves, because things might get a little philosophical as we delve into the ideologies of different paths. But you might ask, what is the significance of talking about our understanding of the paths? Let us go back to the end of the world analogy. If you were to know about the exact date when you will die, would you regret the life you've lived? It's practically pointless to cling to it, so why ponder? I'm not sponsored by Nihility in any way, but Penacony had this kind of premise with the question, why does life slumber? In which Acheron quoted,
"We don't know the answer yet, but we're about to awaken from this dream."
And I kid you not when I say that Acheron's the GOAT in asking questions, because it's with this very specific line that already hints the interplay of finality and our understanding of the paths. The dialogue continues until we get to yet another goated line of Acheron.
Everyone, and every face they remember. The joy and the heartaches. The vows sealed and those left hanging. All will inevitably march towards a predetermined ending. If you had grasped the journey's finale right from its inception, I would ask, would you still embark on this journey?
In which the Trailblazer responds, "I would blaze a trail without hesitation." And this is exactly where the Trailblazer had a deeper understanding of the Trailblaze. We talked about choices a while ago, and at the end of the day, Acheron made a remark that it's our decision that mattered more, rather than the answer to that question. Decision is far more deep-rooted than just the answer because it is something that requires a lot of discerning and pondering. For the Trailblazer, it means reflecting on the path of the Trailblaze. So whatever decision it might be was made through the influence of the will of the Trailblaze. And this decision already considers the predetermined ending, which is another way to say finality. We woke up from Enna's dream and fought the embryo of philosophy. After that, the rest was history. The Astral Express managed to fulfill Mikhail's legacy, tipping their hats off to the three late nameless while leaving a lasting impression on their just finished Trailblaze expedition. This wouldn't all happen if the dream didn't end, because as Black Swan revealed, we have lost the Sunday and no one survived. Also, if we bring up the question to the invitation letter, we know that the Trailblazer responded with,
We will wake up from our dreams
This exact quote is a really good metaphor to my end of the world analogy. Let's dissect this. We have known in the penacony dreamscape that sleep is the rehearsal of death, which would later on be revealed as dormancy. Dreams here would be the life that we live in before the end comes. When we wake up from the dream would end, bringing us back to reality. This act of waking up would be equated to dying, with reality being another iteration of life. And so, if finality establishes an oxymoronic relationship with the origin and the end, then finality would be that someday. As of the Path of the Trailblaze, the Express has brought with them a cathartic experience while having a newfound definition of trailblazing, different from how they view it before and during the dream mayhem of penacony. From these turns of events, we could create a reference model of how finality works, which now brings us the question of what does the understanding of the paths have to do with this? Let's go back to our random seed generator theory where I said that there would be certain aspects of the universe that would still remain, and how it would also apply for the aeons. Let's cut to the chase. Will the aeons meet their end for good after finality? No. Instead, what could happen is that these paths would have newer prominent significations based on how they were defined in the previous finality. I'll be using a speculative example. Erudition won't be completely gone, and it would still retain its genius properties, but there would be a chance that it's reinvented as evolution. Where erudition seeks answers to the mysteries of the universe, evolution will continuously open advancements for every answer they get. Remembrance won't fade completely, and it would still stay true with its memory significations, but it could re-emerge as epiphany instead. Where remembrance keeps the collective memories archived, epiphany will synthesize the gaps in between seemingly unconnected memories. Same goes for Trailblaze. They would still retain their zeal for making a difference, but it could make its return as Revolution. Where Trailblaze embarks on an expansive journey to light up uncharted places, Revolution will bring newness and establishes progress and civilization for the unknown. Pondering the significance of the paths will give us many possibilities as to what kind of metamorphosis these would go under, and I'm already calling shots that if the Astral Express chooses to venture to Amphorius next, they would have a brand new approach to trailblazing as opposed to the continuing of legacy in penacony. Okay, what about some game of word association? What can we associate with the word trailblaze? Journeying? Innovation? Novelty? Pioneering? Leading? Inspiring? Now, what about hunt? Kill? Purge? Aim? Pursue? Find? Then what about beauty? Aesthetics? Goodness? Idol? Awe? Purity? Okay, we can't keep playing word association forever, so let me just know in the comments what are other things you'd like to add. What we did just now is we pondered the properties of those paths and the ideals that embody those paths. But if you notice, some word associations don't really work two-way, like beauty for example. Beauty in the term beauty of the soul would be different compared to beauty in the term beauty standards. But they are still both part of the same vague term beauty. And I think that's the idea behind the paths. There's a reason why order assimilated with harmony and permanence probably got absorbed into abundance due to their same interpretation of immortality. So when it is said that finality is the end of other eons and paths, it only implies the end of a specific interpretation of it. If, quote-unquote, the dark sun were to return to ashes, it would probably pertain to the singular oneness of aimlessness and not the other properties of nihility. Then in the next finality, those other properties would have the chance to manifest as a newer path, with an eon embodying it. This explains the random seed generator theory that I was talking about. But why can't finality end itself? Let me ask you, can you begin a beginning? I would think so. I mean, there was always a potential beginning in making this video, but it was my choice to begin working on the details instead of procrastinating to make this happen. But can you end an ending? If a life passes away, what more is there to end? If terminus appears in every moment of finality, what makes it possible for finality to occur many times? Then at least, I know you guys have a favorite show, game, or song. Watching, playing, or listening to that favorite definitely hit home to your heart. And when it reaches to the end, you would be left with various different emotions to process. But it wouldn't be your favorite if you didn't have those experiences living in your head rent-free. So how does it become your favorite? By reliving or replaying or going back in time in memory to reminisce how much the experience meant for you. Yes, that is what allows finality to happen again and again, by going back in time. And this is exactly how terminus moves in time. In fact, if you reverse the linear progression from the beginning to the end, it would look like terminus traveling from beginning to end, when in our point of view, he's going back to the beginning. So here is how we can explain how finality works. If we begin from the moment of finality, terminus has reached the end where the predetermined ending of the paths and the eons will begin to wind down. Then as we we enter the moment of finality, terminus will arrive at the beginning where the random seed generator theory will take place. This is how the Stellaron hunters are ahead of us, and this is how Firefly will get to live as herself. Did that surprise you? If so, then let's do a recap. We get to know from Firefly that she will have 3 deaths in penacony. She knows this as part of her script. The first one being her impalement by Sleepy to find herself sent to Dreamflux Reef. The second one being her off-screen death as a confirmation on a method to break out of Enna's dream. Then the third one is a sacrifice, where she takes the sparkle bomb far away to save everyone in the Radiant Feldspar. Prior to these events, she only knew that she would die 3 times, but she had no idea what kind of deaths there would be. And if you take a closer look at her dynamic with Blade, you could say that they move in opposite directions in regards to death. Blade wants to die and Firefly wants to live. But what if I tell you that these 3 deaths helped her achieve it? Remember how we understood the Trailblaze? Let's apply it to the context of Firefly's deaths. No, not death, but Firefly's death. Our first encounter with Sleepy turned out to be enigmatic and Firefly didn't have an idea what it was. Or did she? We only knew that Sleepy pursued her because they had accessed the hidden parts of the memory zone. When she got impaled and turned to goo in front of us, she muttered the words,
Sorry.
not because she died in front of us, but because she knew that she owed us an explanation. Her first death was perceived as an attempt to get to the bottom of the Watchmaker's legacy. But from the time after her first death happened, this backtracking earned her a realization about what's going on in the entire dreamscape. All was possible because Sleepy ushered her to Dreamflux Reef, the real penacony. And it is in that moment where Firefly had the opportunity to explain the situation to us. Her second death was implied off-screen by Acheron, where she told us that Firefly found the key to break free from Enna's dream. Without Sleepy, her idea was a real death, which I'd say was a gamble, but no. She was indeed aided by her script. She knew that death won't be the end, and if you carefully listen to what Firefly or Sam said when we parted ways in the audition venue, she said,
May we meet again in reality.
Reality! She was the very first one to wake up and break free from Enna's dream upon acknowledging this. It was that crucial confirmation that gave Acheron the go signal to end the sweet dream. This was the moment the Trailblazer found his answer, which was reiterated by Firefly on the closing cutscene of the Radiant Feldspar quest. The stakes were high given that Sparkle had set up bombs to make penacony explode. By basic inference, we can already expect that this is where Firefly's final death happens, and without the dream of the Order, she might die for good. But she didn't, which is interesting. She tried to make a bargain with Jade in her pawn shop with a desire to live her own life, but she had nothing of equal value to give up. She already reached the point of peak determination that it's unthinkable for her to die for good. But then this death was still open for interpretation. This was her gamble, her dealings with fate. So if she knew that she'll already face her final death at this moment, why would she still have an unwavering desire to live? It's because she already found her answer in penacony. For every death there was a realization. They were fixed occurrences, an inevitable conclusion. But all throughout those deaths, Firefly was presented with more answers. So when everything is possible in a dream, she made her desire to live possible as well. Also, speaking of deaths, Elegy seeks to find traces of finality in her near-death experiences. This can be interpreted in 2 ways. First, when we awaken from a near-death experience, we tend to step aside from our mundane day-to-day life and ponder philosophical questions out of shock. I mean, who wouldn't? After realizing that we were close to a sudden end, Elegy wanted to take a look at our philosophical ponderings to get a glimpse of finality. Second, our near-death experiences were among the crucial crossroads where an outcome would emerge among the others. How will things progress if we, the Trailblazer, were to die in a battle against the person, or event, or emanator, or aeon? There is that idea that finality could take place and trigger the random seed generator theory among the multiple possible events that would happen in the future. So what does finality aim to do? Based on how we explained the significance of Trailblaze in penacony as well as Firefly's deaths, it aims to push us towards redefining and reinterpreting concepts. When something begins, any way of interpreting it could come across as first impression. It's only after that thing ends that we could fully grasp what it is. You cannot say you understood the movie if you haven't watched it from beginning to end. So instead of being just an endpoint, perhaps finality is that checkpoint that gives us a chance to renew or be renewed. It's that threshold that prevents something from going too far. It's a point in time where we ponder the unfolding of events that happen in our lifetime. It's a culmination of what we have learned, like an exam that would give us a preface of how we would do in the next exams to come. People don't really talk about philosophical topics out in the open, so those who do would end up murmuring and ponder. After all, maybe this is why members of the Stellaron Hunters are as calm and collected, as if they have planned everything out. They pondered everything, and in everything they do, they no longer have the regrets that come along with it. For the meantime, give yourselves a high five because there's always more to discover with Deep Dive. I'm Mercanique, and this is my verdict. Thanks for watching.